been underway with this Jizo Sesshin, and it continues. We are getting to know Jizo Bodhisattva as a way of practice. And tonight I'd like to share about Jizo Bodhisattva as a pilgrim. That's one of Jizo's ways of being, is on pilgrimage. And so to stir that in, I'd like to talk about Zen as a pilgrimage, using my own pilgrimage, some elements of Jizo as a pilgrim, and then just some general, what are some signposts when we are on a spiritual pilgrimage, whether that's Zen or otherwise. Jizo Bodhisattva has been a pilgrim for the past 2,000 years. And we can define a pilgrim as someone who travels a long distance to a sacred place as an act of devotion. I'll share a little bit here. Jizo Bodhisattva is often portrayed carrying a pilgrim's staff and wearing pilgrim garb. In the ancient Chinese caves of Tenghuan and also in Korea, he was shown with his robe worn as a traveler would, draped over his head and shoulders for protection from the weather. Statues of Jizo are found at thousands of crossroads in Japan, from intersections of major highways to the divergence of dirt paths among rice paddies. His presence helps travelers choose the right direction. Jizo is the guardian not only of those who travel on the earthly plane, but also of those at crucial crossroads in the spiritual journey. So I looked up what are the parts of a pilgrimage, and I found there was a resource on the PBS website, which seems as good a resource as any, really. There's apparently a documentary or a series of documentaries on different pilgrimages. So they organized it into six parts of a pilgrimage. Number 1, the call. Number 2, the separation. Number 3, the journey. Number 4, the contemplation. Number 5, the encounter. And number 6, the completion and the return. Maybe you will see some part of yourself and your spiritual life here. But again, it doesn't have to be Zen. This can happen in any form. I was surprised that Zen ended up being the form that was the channel for my own spiritual life. I did not plan that. I don't think I would have picked it. Years ago, my husband and I were having relationship troubles. We weren't married then, but we had been together a long time, had a few iterations of our relationship, and we finally went to counseling and realized we needed a spiritual connection or this was not going to work. So that just then was 2 sentences that represent quite a lot of suffering and some very painful reckoning with our own karmic patterns. We were so worn out after our therapy sessions that we couldn't even talk. He couldn't drive. And so I would drive us to Burgerville and we would get pumpkin milkshakes and just sit there dumbstruck, just, had no idea what just happened to us. But that kind of pain can be the call. What we had been doing was not working. We had to stop doing what we were doing and find some other way. So we went shopping. We started in Christianity, Catholic, Protestant, some new agey things, some 12-step programs. 12-step encourages you to shop for a higher power. Or maybe that's just Debtors Anonymous. That was my program. We're good at shopping. The Higher Power Boutique. though this may be a uniquely American twist. But I like the idea that you really can trade in the old one, maybe a punitive or remote or capricious higher power, and explore, if not a being, maybe a sense of something larger. To what can you surrender? That's the question. And even as we continue to try out different communities, I had the sense that it was like touring different gardens. Some were like traditional flower gardens, high maintenance, nothing native. Some were gardens with hokey or whimsical yard ornaments. But when we started practicing in the Zen tradition, it was like visiting an expansive Japanese garden with a pond. A pond that I knew was infinitely deep. And I was afraid. I was actually afraid to dip my toe in because I could sense that depth. And that was also why we kept returning. This was the separation part of the pilgrimage, the abandoning of what was familiar, stepping into something mysterious, and trusting only what we could barely see in front of us, what we could feel under our feet in that moment. We ended up in Zen. I would never have picked the idea of Zen. Inherited from monastic and samurai cultures, too macho, too reserved, too regimented, too austere, not enough color, no purple scarves allowed, no water bottles in the meditation hall. So, yet here I am. So I find there's not that much to be said for trying to find the spiritual home that makes sense to you, though that is nice when it happens. If I had done that, I would not be here. Now my husband, Bancho, on the other hand, he knew he was home from the first ring of the bell. He knew it. It took me about another year. I hated meditating. But what I did was show up eventually. That's taking the journey. Getting on the bus with all the other pilgrims. Not driving. I received the welcome and the generosity of the teachers of the monastic community and eventually picked up the practice. The relationship with the teachers, just seeing my teacher for a once a week talk and then sanzen once a week. This became regular and real. And the relationship with the practice became regular and real. And by that I mean at times very difficult or painful, and at times completely inspiring and miraculous. We were able to practice very deeply as lay people, doing Sesshin regularly and meeting with the teacher regularly. Knowing and being known. It's no small thing. Supporting and being supported. Mostly just showing up. That really is the main thing. Just showing up. Then there's the contemplation part of the journey, of the pilgrimage. Zen is a contemplative practice. It's built in. My husband grew up Catholic. He says he was never taught how to pray. He had a rosary. He went to confession sometimes. He went to the college Catholic group for a while. But he didn't really find real sustenance. And then by this time, there was the revelation of the abuse scandals in the Catholic Church that really started rolling out around the time we were shopping. So yeah, we landed in Zen. In Zen, we learn how to pause the frenetic body. And at some point, maybe the frenetic mind will follow. Sometimes. We get glimpses of that. Whenever we go on a sesshin, it is its own pilgrimage. Every time. Because we are seeking. This is a sacred activity. We are seeking the encounter with the mystery. Secondhand information won't do. Nightstand Buddhism won't do. We need to see for ourselves. I still get nervous before a session. I call it the pre-session jitters. This is my constructed self knows the jig is up. And I'm probably going to be uncomfortable. That's like the scariest part, maybe. I know I'm going to be uncomfortable. There's kind of a clean out phase at the early part, maybe, of when we are doing practice or long-term practice, sesshin, where our whole backlog floats to the top. So that can be challenging. It can also be really cathartic. I can remember one sesshin, I was the head of tea, and in the monastery, when you're the head of tea, at the end of the night, you take a tray and, I wasn't the head of tea, I was serving tea. So you serve cookies and tea with this tray, and I was last to go into Sanzen, and I was just weeping and sobbing and snot-covered face and just, hyperventilating, and that's how I was serving tea and cookies. This total wreck. And that's totally fine. It's all okay. You can see our thought habits, see our assumptions, see the thoughts that we believe, and maybe have a chance to question them. So when people start sobbing in sesshin, it's just not a big deal. Stuff comes up. We encounter our life, simple as that. One time I started laughing. There is also this ebullience that can happen in Sanzen, especially towards the later part of the week. But it seemed sort of, less appropriate to be laughing in the Zendo, so I was kind of pretending to be crying because I couldn't stop laughing. Somehow that was okay. But I think that laughing is contagious, so I didn't want to start something. Anyway, simple, encountering our life, simple, but not always easy. It can be really important to have a good relationship with a teacher and maybe even a therapist too. Sometimes stuff comes up that is more than you want to just be repeatedly encountering without some additional support. And that's extremely appropriate and highly recommended to get the right support. I think it took our teachers' generation a little while to really come to grips with the fact that Zen can't do everything, can't really do it all. There's some things you need therapy for. It's the better tool for the job. I mean, there's a lot you can do with both, for sure. That's a whole other talk. We also encounter the mystery, not just our personal stuff. We encounter the mystery. This is also what the ox herding pictures are about. This is another model for the spiritual journey, the Zen journey. Because we encounter for ourselves, we might glimpse something from one of the chants that we recite over and over. Oh, that's what they're talking about. What is the nature of this life? As we continue our practice, we can verify for ourselves the teachings, to see for ourselves what's true. And that is a real fertile ground for faith. We aren't talking about blind faith in this tradition. It's a faith that grows from our direct experience. It's not remote. It's right here. The encounter with this life. It can't be anywhere else. It's right now. It can't be any other time. I've been listening to Richard Rohr, who is a contemplative Christian. He's he's a Franciscan monk or friar, whatever that is. And he's in his 80s now. He was being interviewed by a comedian, and he told this wonderful story. He was visiting Thomas Merton's Abbey in Kentucky, and he was there for something like 30 or 40 days, so he kept venturing further and further out into the wooded area. And he had been told that there are way out in the woods there recluses, these brothers who live out there and they don't come in. They're more than just hermits, they're recluses. They only come in for the church services twice a year, Easter and Christmas. And apparently the congregation is always waiting to see how they're doing when they come in. Have they lost their minds, or are they glowing with the Spirit? So Richard saw one of these practitioners, and he's in full habit, and so he didn't want to impose on the man's silence, so he bowed reverently to let him pass. And this guy looks at him and yells, "Richard!" He's like, I don't know how he knew who I was. He must not have been that much of a recluse. And he runs over and he says, "Richard, you can preach and I can't. Just tell the people." And he points up to the sky and says, "God is not up there. Just tell the people." And then he walked on. He says that because they don't have to come in for communion, because they're communing all the time. All the time. Awakening is not somewhere else, sometime in the future when we get our act together. Thich Nhat Hanh says, people usually consider walking on water or in thin air a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in thin air, but to walk on earth. Every day we are engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes, all is a miracle. And Einstein said, there are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. And there is that Zen koan, ordinary mind is the way. Ordinary mind is the way. the stuff of our life? Can we align with our life? Can we accept our life? Can we appreciate our life? That's so often our practice, just encountering our life fully. So then the last stage, according to PBS, is the completion, the return. We might realize it's not about having some rarefied experience, though that can be interesting. Hogan says an insight is worth $5 and a cup of coffee. Sometimes something is revealed and we want to hold on to it like the precious. I got it. But it's not about getting some kind of mind state. Mind states are all temporary. So what good is an insight? I mean, it is important to see for ourselves the way things are. The question is, how does it function? Does my practice of sitting with discomfort and resisting the urge to scratch my nose or go on the internet or whatever have anything to do with my life? Am I less reactive at times? Yes. Am I clearer now in terms of seeing the cause and effect on my own life? Yes. Can I apply the teachings in the unique circumstances of my life? Yes. Yes. At some point, and it feels like it was fairly recently, maybe it was as I was nearing receiving transmission as a teacher, or if that had recently happened, and joining the Zen family in a new way, I realized I didn't adopt Zen. Zen adopted me. I didn't choose my religion like I would choose dinner on a menu or choose what kind of car to drive. I don't know how this happened. I do feel fortunate. Though I did also need to learn about the divine feminine in the form of Kanzeon Bodhisattva at first, before I was even a little bit willing to step forward. I thought Buddhism was just another religion with some guy, and I had already experienced a lot of those. Even so, I didn't adopt Zen. It was way more than that. I've been taken up into this family, into this lineage. And for me, I found it has all the components needed in a spiritual practice. I think the 12 steps are like that too. I'm sure there are other spiritual practices that are just as comprehensive. Is it perfect? Is Zen perfect? Maybe you have already noticed that it is not. Zen may or may not be your jam. Even if it isn't, maybe it's where you landed. Back in the 80s, there was a commercial for a substance use disorder treatment center called Charter. And their slogan was, if you don't get help from Charter, get help somewhere. I kind of feel that way about Zen. If you don't practice Zen, keep exploring. Find your path. It's so important. What a sacred endeavor. And maybe you'll find yourself on a pilgrimage. In Chosen's book on Jizo, she outlines the arc of a pilgrimage. One question she starts with is, are you on a path or are you wandering? Are you on a path or are you wandering? We were certainly wandering, seeing what made sense, seeing what felt right. As you explore communities, notice your own responses, head, heart, and gut. That's a good advice from Hogan Roshi. In this country, church attendance is declining precipitously. People do want to do their own thing, rather than become a snake in a bamboo tube, which is the common metaphor for Sesshin or monastic practice. Just imagine a snake in a bamboo tube. How might that feel? That's kind of what we're signing up for. How does a snake even know itself? How does a snake come to know its own true nature, its curving, moving, flowing nature, without those boundaries? It may be that you are tired of wandering. And even though the path may be difficult, at least there is a path that holds out the possibility for the relief of suffering, and that others have walked before you, many others. So for Jizo and for Chosen, the first things to do as you embark on a pilgrimage are setting aside resources, gathering needed equipment, and deciding what vehicle to take. You need to set aside time and money for a pilgrimage. How much money and how much time do you have for spiritual practice? And can this be a priority of life? Of course, everyone's situation is different. Even if your contribution seems small, when it's offered with sincerity, the impact can be more powerful than we know. And in the 12-step program of Debtors Anonymous, we do a spending plan and list the most important spending categories first and then the least important last. Where do you think debt repayment is? You might think it's number one, but it's last. What do you think is the first, most important category to make sure you set aside some resources for? Spiritual expenses, retreats, spiritual books, donations, meditation supplies. How else are we going to clear the wreckage if we're not taking care of our spiritual being? So here's a tangent. Did you know that money is the reason why we can engage in spiritual practice? If you think money is all profane and has nothing to do with spirituality, what if there was no money? We'd be back in the bartering days. I'd have to be raising chickens or something and making sure I had enough eggs to get the clothing I need and stuff. Instead, we work for money. And that enables us to have some, maybe not as much as we would like or need, some time to engage in spiritual pursuits. This is something that really previously was only available to monastics or the aristocracy. This is a very amazing time to be a spiritual person. So what do you need? Jizo has a robe, a bowl, a staff, and a jewel, and a pilgrim's hat. But you already have everything you need. You already have it. All you really need is a breathing body. Body, breath, and mind. when are there opportunities to practice? To pay attention to our experience? When are there not? This is the pilgrimage. There's a lot of different vehicles, even in Buddhism, lots of different kinds of Buddhism. There's no best vehicle. Maybe you'll get on the bus that's the best one for you right now. There's a lot to be said, in my experience, for sticking with a place. But not everyone does that either. That's okay. So let's say you're setting out. Chosen writes, once in a practice group, we asked the question, when did our spiritual journey begin? Some students had a clear memory of the pilgrimage, starting as early as ages 2 to 5. One student recalled at age 4 seeing a tomato plant in the sun, glowingly alive. She knelt down and offered her life to God. Another student recalled walking down a road at age 3, wearing a red and white gingham dress. She saw a rainbow on the road ahead and wondered if she walked into the rainbow, would she continue to exist? Thus began the asking of the great spiritual questions, who am I? Is there a meaning to my life? Even though the pilgrimage begins very early, perhaps before we are born, our experience is that of setting out over and over. Each period of meditation, each retreat is a venture into unknown territory. It's not so easy to keep setting out. We're reluctant to undertake a small journey into our minds, one that lasts for only 3 or 7 days of a retreat. The most difficult parts of retreat are actually deciding to go, and then physically getting there, stepping around all the detours the ego lays out. There are so many cogent and tempting alternatives, and they don't even have to be that attractive. Faced with the prospect of sitting still for 7 days and looking straight at what the mind is up to now or again, faced with having to acknowledge what we are clinging to, faced with giving up our neurotic habits, habits that make us suffer, but that give us a lovely sense of security and familiarity, a specialness and identity, faced with stepping out into what we think is unknown territory, staying home even to scrub the kitchen floor or do the taxes, looks pretty good. I always found that the best time to sign up for a retreat was right after I had completed one. That's when I would be the most clear about how important this is. Oh yes, this is the most important thing. And then by the time that retreat rolled around, I was like, what was I thinking? I don't have time for this. There's way too much to do. How am I going to pull myself out of my life? But that's what I just kept doing. And then there's a guide for the journey, the teacher. It's kind of like a more experienced rock climber. We come up to what looks like a sheer mountain, but they can help you identify the handholds and the toe holds. Chosen says, the teacher says, start right there. That place in front of you that you're gripping so hard. Let go of it. Who, me? We say. Holding on? I'm not holding on to anything. That ledge you're standing on, that's the one you have to step off, says the teacher. The ledge could be almost anything. It's any position we're stuck to, any judgment. journey of 1,000 miles actually begins with one step into empty space. Jizo Bodhisattva is often portrayed with one foot raised slightly, as if to take a step. This is the awareness of mind and body we seek, not dragging or holding on to anything, poised for what life calls us to do in this moment. She says, the next point is very important. The teacher must be alive. As Jiyu Kennet Roshi said, it's easy to practice with a dead teacher, I add, or a teacher 3,000 miles away. In the Zen tradition, we insist upon face-to-face. Even that is often not enough. I have asked some people who have a meditation practice, or might ask them, well, who's your teacher? And they'll say Pema Chodron, or they'll say, Thich Nhat Hanh. And these are really powerful teachers that we can avail ourselves of, their writings, their lectures, their teachings. It's a blessing to get to hear them. But do they know that they're your teacher? Like that's the question. If your teacher knows that they're your teacher, that's a whole other relationship. That's an actual relationship. That's what we're talking about. And we got to travel with our teachers on a pilgrimage. In 2008, Mushin and I and a few other ZCO members, we participated in a pilgrimage to China. We got to see all the big sites. We got to see the Great Wall. We got to see Red Square, the Terracotta Warriors. But we also made a pilgrimage to a place called Jizo Mountain, Jihua Mountain. And we walked all the way up all these stairs. There was evidence of many, many, many previous pilgrims. There's on the railings of the stairs are these chain railings, and on every single chain they were covered with padlocks leading all the way up to the mountain. So people would make a vow and lock the padlock on the chain. We also saw temples and monasteries of the ancient stories. We would have different guides in different localities in China. There's so many different dialects. We'd have to have different guides because they could understand the locals, whereas our previous guide wouldn't be able to. But these temples and monasteries, most of them had been destroyed. A lot of times the guides would say, well, this was destroyed in the Cultural Revolution and got rebuilt. And we heard that a lot. And this in and of itself is a very inspiring fact. It speaks to the great determination, the clarity of the mission. This is a relay race, not a sprint. Generations of practitioners have been passing the baton of practice in these places for thousands of years, no matter what. To see that these are not just fantastic tales, although the tales may be a little embellished, but they are based in a place, and we went to those places. Seeing how Zen was practiced in China helped me understand what was distinctly Japanese about our practice here. The walking meditation, much more free and open. 2 circles, one slow in the middle, one fast on the outside. Arms swinging, energetic. The chants, much more sing-song, very beautiful, whereas Japanese Zen, monotone. We got to see the traditional relationship of the lay people supporting the monasteries, but we also saw some lay people showing up to meditate. Clear-eyed lay people. It's always been the case. We have ancient stories of lay people and women who are able to demonstrate their deep understanding, sometimes besting the monks and teachers in friendly Dharma combat. Those stories are our inheritance. This is a funny story that occurred to me as I was thinking about this pilgrimage again, and now I don't remember if I experienced it or if Chosen told me it or where it came from, but I think it was from this trip in China. So talk about apocryphal or embellished. But I think that our group was taking taxis or something on a very windy road, pretty scary. Traffic in China is very chaotic, but Hogan says it's nothing compared to India. So the driver had on his rear view mirror this little plastic, and it was like a radio. And I got one of these as a souvenir. And you could turn it on and it would just play a chant. Like that was all it was, just a chant. So whenever the road got particularly rough or scary, he would turn it on. And then when it kind of smoothed out, he would turn it back off. Buddhism is just embedded in the culture. Here's your cab driver. Same with Japan. You can see Jizo everywhere. So when is wandering actually not wandering? This is important too. One of my vows, and you're welcome to adopt it if you choose, is to always return to practice. Always return to practice. I have given myself a permanent, maybe lifetimes, permanent permission slip. It doesn't matter how long I've been away. It doesn't matter what I've been up to or not. I can always return to practice. No questions asked. No inner critic attack. Doesn't matter. No apologies necessary. Just return. And that's true for any 25-minute sitting period. Just return. Return to practice. No big deal. It's all we're doing. So that sometimes that wandering happens. We find ourselves, it seems like wandering off the path. At some point, the path is everywhere. You can't actually get off the path. But wandering that is not wandering is taking necessary breaks. Sometimes that's really important in the long trajectory of a spiritual life. And if that happens, whether it's intentional or unintentional, you can just do the experiment. How's your life without meditation? How's it going? And that way we're not holding it too tightly either, just doing it because we should. Chosen says that if she doesn't meditate for a day, she can tell. It's like brushing your teeth or not brushing your teeth. And if you don't brush your teeth for 3 days, then everybody else knows. It's the same with meditation. You can also, in the course of a spiritual life, find yourself at a plateau. This is a practice that might be mistaken for wandering. This occurs after a period of intense practice, usually a long sesshin, when important shifts in the sense of self have occurred. It feels like surgery has been done. Hunks have fallen away, and a rest is needed. We can't work full out for too long. We need a time to rebalance the system, to incorporate what has occurred, and see how it informs our life. During this time, a more relaxed but very regular daily practice seems best. The temptation is to say, well, I worked very hard. I need a complete break. But not to practice during this time means important doors close again. What has been gained slips quietly away, and eventually the work has to be done again. Daily practice is vital at these times. There are statues and paintings of a seated Jizo Bodhisattva. These remind us of the importance of resting in practice. There are two kinds of resting: refreshment and refuge. Refreshment means to rest body and mind. Even the Buddha needed to lie down and rest his back when it was painful. The body wears out and must be attended to. Meditation is a rest and refuge for the mind. Refuge means to rest in the lap of the Buddha, to find sanctuary in the one mind. What is our destination? It's to come home. What is our true home? Many people say when they come to practice, oh yes, I once knew this. Oh yes, I once knew this complete abandon to the nature of rolling down a hill in the grass as a child, or the complete capture of attention and curiosity looking at an iridescent bug. Oh yeah, I used to do this. We do a wildland firefighter retreat, and one of the firefighters who came to our retreat, I mean, their lives are intertwined with big nature, forests and huge fires, and they sleep on the ground. And they're in it for the love of nature. But the job is really hard. And one of the activities we have them do on the retreat is to take a solo walk in the forest and find a good spot and write themselves a letter. And one of the participants told us that this was the first time in years that she had been walking outside, just walking outside, not at work and not doing her physical training. It was medicine. This practice is medicine. When we practice together, when we step onto the path, it will not be perfect. We will not be perfect. We can't be. It will not look the way we thought it would look. It is so much bigger. But we can sometimes get a glimpse. We can sometimes remember over and over as we travel the dusty and challenging roads of practice. Maybe click your bare feet together, your bare heels together. There's no place but home.